Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Semi-Related Podcast. Today, we have a new kind of guest. I'm going to introduce our guest for today, Matt Hertz. Matt is the CEO and founder of Third Person. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
We were just both chatting a little bit before we hit record that we're a little self-conscious about our hair. So if you're watching on video, just don't pay attention to our hair. We may not have brushed it properly this morning. So
If you have any recommendations for hair product, for those listening, please let us both know. We love e-commerce, so happy to purchase from your favorite shops.
yeah, we'll accept referral links too if you have one.
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. Well, Matt, you're already getting into it. I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your background. I was doing a little snooping earlier. I saw one of your internships on your profile, and I'm curious if you know which one I'm talking about. If you want to kind of talk about how you got into that, and then kind of segue that into how you found yourself in supply chain logistics e-commerce.
Yeah, sure. I can bore you for a minute or two here. I am curious which of the internships you are most intrigued about, but was it the one at CNBC, or was it the one in investment banking, or
Yeah, it
uh,
was the CNBC. I'm curious to hear kind of the story on that one. So
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah, maybe taking a quick step back. So I was actually born and raised in Canada. I now live in Nashville, Tennessee. So quite a move for a little Canuck like myself. But yeah, born and raised in Canada. Went to college in Montreal, and then studied finance in college. Moved to New York after college to start my career in finance, which many of you know is a logical place to do so. But actually started my career in 2008, which was not a very logical time to start your career in finance, as a young person, as an entry level person. But I actually did spend 2 years in finance at a hedge fund, and as I mentioned, studied finance in college. Did a lot of internships over the summers in investment banking, to sort of gear up to a full time role upon graduating. As I just mentioned, I did spend a summer at CNBC, NBC's Business News Network, in New Jersey, where I kind of had a bit of a rotation there. Spent some time on their Squawk Box kind of morning show. For those who listen, as well as intern for Jim Cramer on his Mad Money show, which I think was in the second season when I was there, and today I think it's season 25. So it's been quite a few years, but yeah, it was really a lot of fun. Sort of enjoy that media side of business, and it gave me some really good perspective. But in any event, spent a couple years in finance, and then as we all know, 2008, 2009 were not the most glorious years, as I alluded to earlier. And skipping over some details in the interest of time here, I ended up joining what became the first startup I was a part of, a company called Rent the Runway, which many listeners are probably familiar with. It's a women's dress rental business. It's now a publicly traded company. I joined the business 2 weeks in. I was their fifth employee and their first operations hire, and knew nothing about operations or supply chain. Right, like as I sometimes joke, I don't think I could even spell FedEx at the time. But I was quite fungible. I knew how to spell fungible, but not FedEx. I was on work visas, right? I'm Canadian, and just tried to figure things out and did a pretty decent job in figuring it out. So spent some time there, and then left to join Birchbox, which was one of the pioneers in subscription commerce. So that really gave way to all these other concepts, all the meal kit companies, and toilet paper and Dollar Shave and companies like that. So I joined Birchbox in their first month as their first full-time employee, overseeing supply chain, and helped them scale to about 1 million orders a month. And was overseeing shipping, fulfillment, procurement, packaging, all that good stuff. Moved to San Francisco to spend a few years at a logistics startup called Ship. And then in 2017, after I got my green card, I started doing a little bit of consulting and advising, formalized it into a consultancy called Second Marathon, where I was helping emerging and high growth e-commerce brands solve a lot of the same pain points and challenges that I faced myself when I was sort of an in-house operator. Um, and then a little over a year ago, in March of 2024, I sort of pivoted the consulting business and productized it to build technology and software and called the business Third Person. So thirdperson.co is the business that I primarily run today, or that I run today, which consumes most of my energy, I should say. It's essentially a productized version of the consulting business that I was running, which effectively helps e-commerce brands discover and connect the best 3PL. So maybe I'll pause there because I know I've been consuming the first few minutes here, but hopefully that gives you a quick recap of my background, and I know we'll dig into some of those points.
Yeah, I would love to go back to that first role at Rent the Runway and hear a little bit about what your experience was, kind of learning the ropes of logistics and um, some of the lessons that you came across in that time.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I joined about 2 weeks in. So, and this was 2009. So, gosh, 16 years ago. I'm aging myself. And we, I know this is a family show, so I won't say what I want to say, but we didn't have our bleep together, right? Like
Yeah,
we didn't, it was scrappy. It was completely scrappy. And not only did I not know logistics at that type of scale, I also didn't know women's dresses,
yep,
right? I wasn't a fashionista. So like nothing was barcoded. We didn't have any RFID, no technology like that. We had our warehouse management system, and we did all the fulfillment ourselves. Like our warehouse, we were essentially subtenants of a dry cleaners in the West Village in Lower Manhattan. For those who are familiar, we were on Morton Street, right by the river. We had about 100 square feet in like a commercial dry cleaner where we were doing all the fulfillment, and it was literally muscle memory, right? Like nothing was barcoded, as I mentioned. Our warehouse management system was basically an Excel document. I think that predated Google Sheets. I think that came later, or maybe it was like their first year of Google Sheets. So it was incredibly rudimentary, and we just had to figure things out. And with we didn't have like the carrier rate shopping and zone shopping that exists today. And there's a lot of really great tools that help shippers, help users kind of rate shop, get the most economical rate, and be able to zone skip and all that. Like we didn't have any of that. It was like looking up rate charts on ups.com and printing through ups.com, and it was just incredibly slow, frankly, and rudimentary. But it really gave me like a quick crash course in not only how to deal with e-commerce at scale, but also how to figure out all these challenges of like scaling up operations and hiring workers to help fulfill the orders. I mean, I remember just in the first 12 months or at the end of the first year, I mean, we had about 25 associates, workers in our warehouse who were picking and packing orders, and we ended up very quickly moving out of that commercial space and into a more traditionally looking fulfillment center. But it also taught me that with that model, with Rent the Runway's model and the uniqueness of the returns, everything that goes out has to come back or should come back at least. It taught me that there's so much opportunity for brands whose core competency is something that consumers think of them. In other words, for most brands, you don't think of them as like a logistics company. You
hmm
think of them as a makeup company or a fitness equipment company or a pet food company. But for Rent the Runway, where one of the core competencies was dry cleaning and the speed at which they're able to process goods, it was really the first time where I was like, aha, it actually makes sense for Rent the Runway to continue doing the fulfillment themselves and not to outsource to a typical 3PL, which was different than my next experience at Birchbox, where we did outsource to a 3PL because we acknowledged that fulfillment need not be a core competency of the business. So we decided to outsource it to a 3PL, a company whose core competency was or is logistics.
Yeah, that's a thread I'm definitely going to want to pull on later. But keeping at Rent the Runway for one more minute here, having our follow up there. What was kind of the evolution of some of the systems that you use there, right? So you mentioned starting out with that 100 square feet in dry cleaners. How did it change over time? How did you move up to this 25 associates? What were, some of the systems that you moved to, or some of the processes maybe that you learned along the way? And two, I mean, the customer experience and managing returns, like I can't imagine doing that so early stage. So
Yeah, I want to, I wish I could tell you that it was glamorous and, we were embracing technology I
yeah,
mean, today they clearly are using advanced technology, right? Because it's been 15 or 16 years, but um, I think the only thing that really scaled, in that first year at Rent the Runway was our space. Where, as I said, we moved from 100 square feet, not 100,000 square feet, but 100 square feet. Like, I think about the size of my studio apartment in New York, little, maybe a little more than that. We were kind of up against the wall, like our boxes that we were fulfilling every night, like they couldn't fit in our square footage. We had to get UP, we were sending temp workers or associates all day long to run over to the UPS hub, which was about a quarter mile from where our dry cleaners was, where our warehouse was, just so we can get boxes out the door. So
yeah,
we would have space for more volume. So that was kind of the trigger that said, oh, we probably need more space. So we ended up, our second kind of warehouse was about half of our corporate office, which was about half a mile away from the warehouse. We moved in there, moved all our inventory. I think we started with our initial inventory, if I recall, was about 600 pieces. So we had 600 units on hand. So it wasn't a whole lot, but that really accelerated quickly. So I think when I left the company, we had, I want to say, like 25,000 pieces of inventory. So it really blew up pretty quickly. And, as we kept running out of space, we just kept moving to, bigger locations. I think our second facility was 10,000 square feet, in a office building. And then, which we were sharing with our corporate office. And then we moved one floor up into a space that I believe was like 25,000 square feet. But our technology really didn't adapt to the
hmm,
extent that it probably should have. I mean, a secret that I can probably share, well, I know I can share today, but which we did not share back then, was that this is how like rudimentary our technology was, or how non-existent it was. We didn't know systematically whether a customer returned a garment or not, right?
yeah,
So in theory, for those who know the Rent the Runway model, if you're a customer today, if you don't return something, you get dinged, right? You have to pay for the item, right? Um, Sort of, I guess, like Blockbuster, right? You rent a movie, you got to send it back. Back when Blockbuster was a thing. Um, at the time, like, and we were sending out like expensive inventory, right? I mean, these dresses could be hundreds of dollars, and women would order two or three of them, so a couple $1,000s of inventory. We literally did not know if a woman or a customer returned the garment or not, right? And so we never bill people for being late or non-returning items. And that's because we literally did not have a system or technology other than like Matt going through the list of orders from a few days ago to like manually confirm whether
yeah.
customers return product. So today they have those systems in place. It's been 15 years, so they've adapted. But that first year at the company, it was a lot of like chicken scratch and pen to paper, so to speak. And I wish I had time to kind of think about the business more holistically. But I mean, our first week of operations, we had 3 or 4 orders, and a year later, I mean, we were doing 1,000 orders a day. So
Yeah.
we really grew, rapidly.
Well, let's transition then to kind of how you moved over to Birchbox. And is this your first experience with working with a 3PL too? And kind of tell me a little bit about, was that decision already made when you moved over, or were you part of that? Kind of what did that process look like?
Sure. So it actually started off very similar to Rent the Runway in that we were doing the fulfillment ourselves. So I joined a little later at Birchbox. Instead of 2 weeks, I joined about 2 months. So still very early, but a little bit later. Yeah, we were we were actually renting space or using space at one of the owners or one of the founders of Birchbox. they have a family business in the industrial lighting space. So they actually had a warehouse in New Jersey. So our first couple months of business, we were basically pulling associates off the line, at the warehouse and having them help us, kit some boxes. So I think when I joined, we were doing maybe 300 or 400 orders a month, in our subscription box kitting. Um, and we were basically doubling or tripling every month for those first few months. So, we got to, my first month there, I rented space in Midtown Manhattan, at basically a public storage location. Set up some folding tables, brought in a temp agency firm. I think we had maybe 15 people, and we just like set up lines and started kidding ourselves because at that time, I really wanted to know, I wanted to understand the business. So I wanted to do it myself before I hired someone or outsourced the business to someone. I wanted to understand what our economics were. Like, how much did it cost me to do the fulfillment myself and with my team, knowing that I'm not doing this optimally? Was it $2 an order? Was it $5 an order? Was it 50 cents? So to like start getting a benchmark for what this would cost, I thought was really important. And then also to understand where errors can happen, right? Like, what's the complexity in this business, or is there not a whole lot of complexity? Or do manufacturers label product as shampoo on the outside of the carton when it's actually conditioner, right? I wanted to understand where errors can happen. So we did that for a couple months, maybe months 3 and 4 of the business. We ended up getting to about 5,000 orders a month, just sort of organically or through our early growth. And then when we hit about 10,000 orders a month, we decided to ultimately outsource it to what became our first 3PL, a company in New Jersey called Capacity LLC, which is really a great 3PL. I mean, they're still around. I think they just celebrated their 25th year of business, and still have a really good relationship with their team. But yeah, they became Birchbox's first 3PL. They helped us scale, and again, it's been some time, so I'm going out, and I'm leaning on my muscle memory here, but they helped us scale from about 10,000 orders a month to about 100,000 orders a month. And that happened in just about a year. Maybe it was 15 months. So it really grew rapidly, and not annual volume, that is monthly volume. So Capacity was a terrific partner for Birchbox in our early days. And Capacity works with a lot of brands in the health and wellness and beauty space. So this was really a core competency of theirs. We got to 100,000 orders a month. We ended up outsourcing to a second 3PL, a different 3PL. We just sort of, outgrew, Capacity's competencies, and, decided very amicably to, move away. And, we moved to another 3PL also in the New Jersey area, who got us to about 500,000 orders a month. So scaled us from 100,000 to 500,000. And then, maybe 18 months later, 2 years later, we ended up outsourcing to a third 3PL. So in my 4 years at the business, we actually worked with 3 different 3PLs because we were just growing so rapidly, and we kept needing a whole different suite of competencies from our 3PL partners. And I think this is something that brands and frankly 3PLs sometimes neglect to appreciate, is that like there is a graduation element in the relationship between a brand and a 3PL. I say it's sort of like the school system, here in the US, where, the institution, the school, the nursery that teaches you the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3, how to count, is not the same institution that gives you a college degree, right? You go somewhere for, K to 5, then you go to your middle school, then you go to your high school, then you go to, a college if you do. But there's like a constant graduation because each of those institutions kind of focus on a certain aspect of your life cycle, right? And there are far too many 3PLs that think that they can scale you from order 1 to order million, and it just doesn't work like that. I truly have not discovered a 3PL that can like support a brand through that whole life cycle. So while it's always unfortunate when you leave a 3PL, and when we left 3PLs at Birchbox, we didn't leave any of our partners because of poor performance or because they were too costly. We left because we just outgrew their competency. We sort of graduated, right? We
Yeah.
became an alma mater of their 3PL. But yeah, we grew so quickly. I mean, you could do the math, but grown from like 500 orders a month to 1 million in about 4 years. I mean, I don't know what that month over month compounded growth rate is, but
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Well, too, you mentioned earlier there, kind of understanding some of the economics behind it, right? You talked about what is the cost per order, and that's why you wanted to start out and kind of manage it yourself. So, did some of that finance background kind of help you out in understanding this, and then to evaluating those relationships with different partners throughout your kind of time with them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, operations and logistics is very quantitative. Logistics, supply chain is, most would say, it's a cost center of an e-commerce business. So, um, you know, 15-20% of top line, of AOV, of revenue for an e-commerce brand is typically attributed to, fulfillment and shipping. So it is a significant line item, and it helps to be, good with numbers and competent with numbers. It helps to be, you know, able to, negotiate and make a deal, right? Which
Yeah,
is maybe, well, I mean, there's certainly aspects of finance where, maybe more on the banking side when you're, deal making. I was more on the trading side, on the equity trading side. So having a competency in numbers was really helpful. But I think for me, the skill that I was able to take from my finance days, and sort of transpose that to my early logistics days, and frankly still today, 15 years later, is I think I used this word earlier, but my ability to be fungible, my ability to sort of juggle a lot of tasks or a lot of acts, especially right now with everything going on in the world, with tariffs and uncertainty and topics that we'll probably get into in a few minutes. Like
yeah,
it helps to be an operator who is really good at sort of distilling lots of news and lots of information and be able to make a shrewd or a sound business decision based on certain variables, right? It's kind of like a calculus. Being an
yeah.
operator, you sort of have to be good at calculus, figuratively speaking, where you're juggling 10 different variables and you need to make a business decision based on that.
Yeah. Well, too, I mean, I think that's a great point to kind of lead into. Tell us a little bit about, well, I guess let's not skip over. You mentioned Ship too. There's one other company that you kind of worked with. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience there, and then we'll take that into what you're doing now and how that all ties together?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ship was a really fun experience. Yeah, after I left Birchbox, when we hit that milestone of about 1 million orders a month, I saw that as an opportunity to kind of plant my flag there, and at the time I was being recruited to move out to San Francisco to work at a logistics startup called SHYP, not the one that Target bought, that delivery company SHIPT. I wish it was, but in any event, it was SHYP, and we were. I spent about 3.5 years at the company, a little under 4 years at the company. And as I joke, we were the hottest startup in America for about 6 weeks in 2015, and then well, literally, I mean, I joke, but also literally, and then we had a precipitous falling out. We raised a lot of money. I think it was about 65 million in venture capital. Led by Kleiner Perkins. So we had a lot of really great checks, so to speak. And for me, the experience was, I mean, it was a fantastic experience for many reasons. It was also a humbling experience, especially coming from Rent the Runway and Birchbox, where at the time that I left both those companies, we were truly like the hot startups in New York, really in the country, but certainly in the New York e-commerce ecosystem. So it was like, oh, this startup thing is easy, right? Like all startups succeed, right? Don't they?
Yeah,
Right? They all grow 100% month over month, right? This is easy. I love it. And then unfortunately for Ship, we did not have that outcome. The business ended up going out of business. I left maybe 6 or 8 months before that happened. in part because I got my green card, which gave me the ability to start my own business, or be self-employed. But yeah, it was a really humbling experience to sort of finally appreciate that startups can fail and that growth is really difficult and culture is really important. So
Hmm.
it was a fantastic experience doing the sort of startup thing in Silicon Valley and being around such an incredible brain trust of talented engineers, developers, product folks, marketing people, operators as well. But it was also a really great experience for me personally to, appreciate, just like in my finance days where, I learned that things can go to zero, in 2008 and 2009. It was, um, neat or cool is probably not the right word, but it was healthy to experience that startups can fail, and I was
Hmm.
part of one that did. So I am in a way very thankful for that experience. Also very thankful that that experience awarded me my green card, which I was able to use to start my own consulting business, and I've since become a citizen of the U.S. But it allowed me to really start my own professional entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Well, too, I think kind of what led you to Nashville too. So you've been in, this New York and San Francisco startup environments. I mean, this seems like a big jump. What was it that kind of attracted you to that area as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when we were or when I was at Birchbox, our third 3PL, the last 3PL that I worked with when I was at Birchbox, we actually, when we were running an RFP to find a 3PL, kind of running the 3PL search. This is back in, I believe, 2012, if memory serves me well.
Hmm.
Um, we had a short list of a couple providers, and one of them had a facility in Nashville. I think the other was in Indianapolis, and they were both great providers. In lieu of a coin toss, I said, "Where do I want to spend more of my time? For the next couple of years, in Nashville
Yeah.
or in Indianapolis?" And I said, "Well, I think that's an obvious answer for me." So I wish there was a better story, but that was kind of how it went.
Yeah.
So it was somewhat of a selfish move, but also, Nashville and sort of the Tennessee area is a really great place to, to have, distribution when you think of, like, where the population is across the country. So yeah, for the ensuing, 2 years or so, I was kind of commuting back and forth between New York and Nashville, checking up on the facility, and we had a team, at the facility. So, I was spending quite a bit of time there. So, after I moved out to San Francisco for a few years, and eventually decided to start my own business, I realized that I wasn't taking advantage of the amenities that San Francisco offers, and the cost of living to take advantage of those amenities. I wasn't working at a big tech company like a Google or a Microsoft or an Airbnb. If I was working for myself, I might as well do so in a place where the cost of living is more affordable,
Hmm.
tax and all that good stuff. So and I really enjoyed spending time sort of commuting to Nashville. So in 20 was it 17 or 18? 18, I believe. 2018, summer of 18, so about 7 years ago now. Ultimately decided to move to Nashville, run my business from here where I am today, and I've never looked back.
Yeah, I've spent quite a bit of time out at Nashville. My little brother just finished up school there, and I was out there for Home Delivery World too, which
Oh
I
yeah, sure.
somehow missed you there. But yeah, it's a beautiful spot. I mean, great weather, a lot of nature, and couldn't think of a better place for, some art and entertainment and food too. So can't blame you for making that decision as well.
Absolutely. Sorry I missed you at Home Delivery World. We actually had a small exhibit booth in the startup zone there, and I was hosting a panel. So next, if you do return next year, we'll have to hook up there.
Yeah, it was a great show and there was a lot going on. But I want to kind of talk about like how you transition these experiences, from Rent the Runway to Birchbox, and then transition that into consulting and started to work with some of these clients. Because as you mentioned, you had some great experience, and I think you pulled some really good lessons from your time at Birchbox of finding out, okay, there's right partners for these different scales. And I think we can kind of segue this into like how you distilled that all down into, what you're doing now with third person. So tell me a little bit about making that transition from being an operator to kind of this consulting role.
Yeah, so when I started my excuse me, when I started consulting in 2017, after I left Ship, it started off slow, just like it typically does. I started with one client, and one became two, and two became three, and over time. But what I realized was that the skill set that I had developed, over the prior 10 years or so, the first 10 or so years of my career, being, an operator in-house, at a company or at a brand was very much desirable. And candidly, there weren't a whole lot of folks like us, like me, who had that experience, right?
Mhm.
Who was a part, who had been a part of, successful e-commerce brands, and who were then pivoting into running their own consulting business. So I was kind of like a big fish in a small pond, or maybe a small fish in a small pond, but there weren't many of us, was the point. So I was also fortunate that those companies that I was a part of, they became big, and I had a really good rapport with the teams, and those teams, or folks in the companies have, over time, had left to join other e-commerce businesses. So some of my early clients in my consulting business were friends of mine from Birchbox, or from Rent the Runway, or even from Ship, who were now VPs or decision makers at other fun e-commerce brands, that were like, oh yeah, Matt, we can use your help, on this shipping project or on this
Yeah.
fulfillment project. And I said, great, I'd love to help. So it was always word of mouth, and to this day, most of my relationships are word of mouth. I'm a huge believer in just doing quality work, and what goes around comes around. And I don't have to be the fastest growing or the biggest, but I've always wanted to be the best at what I do. So I was very fortunate that I had a really strong network of folks who trust and respect the work that I do, and that led to some of my early, consulting engagements. And I eventually, hooked up with a friend of mine, and we decided to kind of collaborate and scale the consulting business called Second Marathon. And over the next 4 or 5 years, we were fortunate to work with well over 100, certainly dozens and dozens of some very recognizable brands across all product categories, anywhere from pre-launch brands to a handful of billion-dollar businesses. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I think we were also leveraging an important trend in the market, which is that brands are trying to stay leaner longer, right? In lieu
Yeah.
of bringing on a team, a dedicated logistics team, those who are using AI or other tools like that to kind of supplement what may have otherwise, or early, 10 years ago, been a mid-level employee. They're leaning on consultants and contractors to kind of plug in some of the holes. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in that sense.
Yeah. And then two, I'm kind of curious as well. Like a lot of these brands kind of have this startup feel or mentality, like looking at some of the names that you mentioned on here. Where do you kind of see like the best time for someone to engage with a partner like you? You know, it's probably the earlier the better, or where do you see some people reaching out to you as well?
Yeah, sure. So today, I don't do a whole lot of consulting anymore because, as I think I mentioned earlier, 90, you know, close to 100%, probably 98% of my,
Yeah.
daily energy, professional energy is focused on third person, which is exclusively focused on, helping brands discover and connect with 3PL partners. So, what I'm seeing is, while I might have a little bit of a bias in that, I like when brands are looking for 3PLs.
Yeah.
I truly never think it's too early, right? I mean, we see that a lot of brands who've signed up on third person are pre-launch brands, pre-revenue, pre-launch. Maybe they're launching their new olive oil company in the fall, or their new, I don't know, creatine company or almond milk company, or whatever it is that they're launching. We've also seen brands that are working with a 3PL, and maybe it's their second or third 3PL, kind of like the journey I had at Birchbox.
Hmm.
And maybe they want to move imminently, in part due to tariffs or geopolitical changes. Others are looking for a 3PL today, knowing that they want to move in Q1 of next year,
Yeah.
right? So it really does span the gamut, and it's often a function of size of the brand, right? It's easier to find a 3PL if you're pre-launch and you don't have inventory anywhere. It's harder to move a 3PL if you've got a million units on hand and you're doing 40,000 orders a month.
Yep.
So there's really no right answer, or like right timing, other than like start the conversation as soon as possible and
Yeah.
just meet people. Because one of the challenges in this space, and this is where why I continue to be really bullish on what we're building, is that there are so many 3PLs. Like, I tell people that there are over 10,000 3PLs in the United States. I was just on a call with a 3PL right before this who said that when he went into Chat GPT and asked how many 3PLs there were, it spit out 24,000, right? So I don't know whether it's 10,000 or
Yeah.
24,000 or maybe more than that, or it's a lot, right? It's more than just 100,
Yeah.
right? So it takes time to do your research and to, I use this analogy all the time. It's kind of like dating, right? Like, depending on, the partner that you may be looking for, like there could be lots of options, but it takes time to find that partner that
Yeah.
meets a certain type of criteria that is important to you, in a partner. And, the relationship between a brand and a 3PL is like a marriage, right? So it's, I would probably discourage a brand to sign an agreement with the first 3PL they talk to, right? You want to talk to a few, you want to get to know the market, you want to evaluate, a handful of 3PLs before you ultimately make a decision to marry them. And that takes time. That's not a 1 week project. That can take,
Yeah.
4 to 6 months is not unreasonable.
Well, let's go kind of dive into third person a little bit. So tell me about what is your process to kind of find this match for these different brands.
Yeah. So, the genesis of the product is, in our consulting business, what we discovered was that the most common service that brands were coming to us seeking our support with was helping them find the right 3PL. So, over time, we sort of sunsetted some of the fractional work we were doing of helping brands negotiate shipping costs and helping them with, production and manufacturing challenges. We said, let's just focus on this one service in particular, help brands find, the best 3PL for them. So we sort of iterated on that over a few years, and then finally had the foresight to say we can automate this, right? We can productize this, we can build software, because we're really not providing a whole lot of value besides curating a short list of 5 or 7 or 10 3PLs that are a good fit for your specific needs. So we said technology is probably more effective at making this short list, curating the short list, than a human is going through a Google Sheet or an Excel document, right? Or like an Airtable database. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea, and why we decided to run with it. And as I mentioned, we launched the business in March of last year of 24. And what was really important to me was offering the service for free to brands. So unlike my consulting business, where we charge the brand a fee, 10K or 20K or 50K for an engagement, we said we want to create an experience that's free, and where brands of all shapes and sizes, whether you're pre-launch and can't afford to pay me 10K for an engagement, you can still use this product. So to this day, now that we're 15 or 16 months into the business, it continues to be completely free for brands to use, like no strings attached. It's not when you get to the last step, there's not something that asks for a credit card or any of that. There's no catches. We don't sell your data. It's completely free. The way that the model works is, the commercial model is we get paid a referral or an affiliate fee from 3PLs, and it's the same fee for everyone. So we
Hmm.
charge 2% of revenue for 24 months. So it's not a true SaaS business in that, we don't have a monthly service fee for 3PLs. 3PLs only pay us when they get paid by the brand. So it's sort of like a success fee. And it's a message that has really resonated with 3PLs because, again, this 3PL I spoke to right before this call, they're like, why wouldn't I do this? It's kind of like found money, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and I said, well, you're right, right? Maybe I should be charging more, but for now, I've decided not to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really simple commercial model for 3PLs to understand. And the way it works is, and what's unique about third person, unlike my consulting business, where it's more like Matt going through a directory, with third person, we've built a proprietary AI powered algorithm that will essentially score, Matt's hot sauce company who's looking for a 3PL against each of the 3PLs who are currently enrolled on our platform. And today we have about 300 different 3PLs on the platform. So these are 3PLs of all shapes and sizes, anywhere from a small 5,000 square foot warehouse in LA to, the large global, billion-dollar 3PLs and everyone in between, a lot in the mid-market. So anytime a brand signs up, it goes through the flow, which takes only a few minutes. We ask the brand a few dozen questions, maybe a couple dozen questions, anything from, obviously your order volume, the number of SKUs, the product category, different technology integrations they need, like ERP and things like that. We ask them to describe what their ideal 3PL looks like. We ask them to, explain how you like to communicate, what account management means to you. So both quantitative and qualitative questions. We take that information, we take that data, and our algorithm will essentially score that specific brand against each of the 300 3PLs on the platform and then present, in the match screen, we present the top 10 matches ranked by score. So we do not allow the brand to look at all 300 3PLs. We think that is not helpful, not useful.
Yeah.
We take our knowledge and insight, i.e., our algorithm, and say just send the brand or just present to the brand the top 10 matches ranked by score. So every 3PL will get a score based on that specific brand. So from 0 to 100%, and we will yield the top 10. So typically you're getting matches that are above 90%. And then the brand, the user can then determine who they want to connect with. So they can send them a message through the platform, or they can book time on their calendar if the 3PL has like a scheduling link that's available. So we're really focused on discovery and connection. There's no button that says request pricing. There's no button that says sign an agreement with the 3PL right now, right? Like what we're trying to do is it's sort of like a dating app, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of building a dating app for 3PLs and brands. And what we're trying to do is get you, the brand and 3PL, on that third or fourth date. So you already kind of have a little, you're already starting to build a little bit of trust with your partner. They know a little bit about you. You know a little bit about them. You trust the third person's algorithm that said that this is a 96% match will be a good conversation. And so the brand is not wasting their time talking to 3PLs who are not a good fit for them because there are over 10,000 of them. So there's lots of options. And similarly for the 3PL, part of the value that we provide them is ensuring that you're not going to get noise, right? You're not
Yeah.
going to get what 3PLs consider to be a disqualified lead so long as you've shared information about your 3PL that is accurate, right? Because our algorithm is, if, in a base case, if the brand, if Matt's hot sauce company is doing 100 orders a month, and Jacob's 3PL says that your minimum monthly requirement is 10,000 orders a month, there's no way that our algorithm is going to score that favorably because
Yeah.
100 is not 10,000. So maybe, I mean, certainly there's a few variables in our calculus, in our algorithm, but we're really trying to ensure that sales folks or leaders at 3PLs only get qualified leads sent to them.
Yeah, and then two, I know you mentioned earlier you may have a bias to connect shippers to 3PLs, but I have to ask, is there ever a time that you think someone is not a fit for a 3PL? What would be a time that, it may not suggest a 3PL for you? Is there a situation where you think that occurs, or do you think with the 10,000 or 25,000, however many there are, there's kind of a fit for everybody out there?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, that is obviously a metric that's important to us. That when a brand signs up, they have at least two or three results that are above a 90%. I mean,
Yeah,
that's sort of a loose metric that we look at. I think of our first 1,000 brands who signed up on third person, we may have had a small or sorry, handful of brands that didn't have a single match above 90%. But it's very
yeah,
uncommon because in this pool of 300 3PLs, we have 3PLs that focus on alcohol shipping, on CBD shipping, who can ship fresh
yeah.
salmon across the country overnight, who can deal with 50 orders a month, who can deal with 50,000 orders a month. So we really have a nice spectrum of, it's sort of like if you picked a random set of 300 hotels in Dallas, where you are, you would probably have the boutique hotels, you would have the large chains, you would have, the one-star hotels, you'd have some five-star hotels, right? So
Yeah.
it's really about creating a spectrum such that there's at least someone who's good for everyone.
And then too, I mean, we've kind of alluded to this a few times throughout this conversation, but I want to kind of give you a chance to go a little deeper on it. That I I see there's this trend for more volatility in supply chain and logistics, and at any moment a product could go viral. Even there's all these things that are so difficult to prepare for. So how have you seen this relationship between 3PLs and brands, or the 3PLs themselves changing to match some of these new dynamics that we're seeing in supply chain and logistics?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, there's a few things there, right? I mean, obviously the piece about, sort of, some of these influencer led brands where something can go viral pretty quickly, um, which is similar but different than, um, tariff policies or
Yeah,
government imposed policies, right? Both equally challenging, but different. I think on the latter, with tariffs, which is obviously a hot topic du jour. Um, I mean, that's been highly impactful, and the last couple months, the last few months, really, really, really since Christmas Eve last year, when things started getting real, with Mexico. That's been really a really popular request, or a trending request, which is with third person is do are there any 3PLs who can support for example bonded warehouse facilities. So if you're not
yeah,
familiar with that concept, and without boring the audience here, just very briefly, it's essentially a concept, type of warehouse that can hold inventory in bond, as it's known, where the shipper or the brand doesn't need to pay duties or tariffs until the moment that that product is exported or sold to a customer. Whereas the common approach is when you're importing product today, say from China, you need to pay the tariff at the point of entry, in Long Beach or LA, wherever it's being imported to, even if you don't actually sell that product to a consumer for another 6 months. So from a cash flow perspective, it's really challenging on brands. So, about 250 years ago, there was this concept of a bonded, facility that came around. And as you can imagine, a lot of these e-commerce companies where cash is important. It's important, should be important to every business, but certainly, for e-commerce companies, they're like, oh my gosh, like, where's there a bonded facility? I want to take advantage of that. So there has been and continues to be a rush to, excuse me, bonded warehouses, or what are known as FTZs, free trade zones, which tend to be in places like Mexico or Canada or Panama or the Dominican Republic, has become a hotbed for fulfillment, such that importers, U.S. brands, can import the product to these markets, not pay tariffs, and then ship it into the U.S. via de minimis and not have to pay tariffs ever. So there's kind of like a cheat isn't the right word because it's not cheating because it's totally legal. And, yes, it is a loophole, but it exists. But there's been some really creative models that, brands and 3PLs have been working together on to help suppress the impact of, some of these government policies.
Yeah, and then too, like you mentioned, I know I threw out kind of two very different examples, but as well with like high growth brands, right? I mean, you can go from 0 to 1 million so easily in the age of TikTok virality or whatever it may be. So, has that been kind of a piece of this as well too? Are you seeing, some of these brands coming to third person who expect some of that growth or find it later on too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, there are some 3PLs that do not like working with influencer brands. I'm not sure why they wouldn't like working with them because there tends to be a lot of growth, but
Yeah,
I think the fear is that some of these never take off, and they tell the 3PL that they're going to be doing 100,000 orders a month, and they're going to be the next, I don't know, one of the Kardashian, Kylie Cosmetics, right? That
yeah,
blows up, and it just never gets there. And the 3PL invests a lot of effort in bringing them on, but it definitely takes a specific skill set of a 3PL to really manage that rapid growth. And that's where sometimes the brand doesn't know that it's coming, and it comes. And there's a brand that I've supported over the last few months, and Taylor Swift wore their clothing in some of her music videos. And as you can imagine, all the Swifties, they find out pretty quickly
yeah,
where she got that clothing, and now this brand has blown up, right? And like they didn't have a relationship with Taylor Swift, so they did not know that was going to come. So it's really, really difficult, as a 3PL to manage that type of growth, right? Like 3PLs do not like volatility, right? Like if you
yeah,
told a 3PL, yes, we're going to be a very volatile customer, that's going to scare them away, right?
yep.
Some might like that, but it's just really difficult to manage that. So, yeah, finding a 3PL that can like embrace these rapid growth rates, who can be fungible, who can be flexible, is really, really important.
And then two, I'm kind of curious, like with your experience at Birchbox, for example, these subscription models, are you seeing any trends in that space too? How has that kind of changed since, like you mentioned, Birchbox being one of the kind of early adopters of that model? How is that changing? And I'm sure that's an attractive customer for a 3PL as well.
Yeah, subscription commerce is really difficult. I get asked, or I've gone and asked the question a lot of like, what makes a good subscription business? And my first answer is, I don't know. I'm not a marketing guy, uh, but then my less tongue in cheek response is, I think ultimately, the most successful subscription models are those. I mean, like if you just think about yourself and your own spending or purchasing needs, right? There are certain things that I need on a subscription basis.
Yeah.
There's certain things I do not need on a subscription basis, right? Like razor blades totally makes sense. Despite my
Yep.
beard, I do shave, right? And or there, like feminine hygiene products, is something that is really common for,
Yeah.
subscription, right? Because like you need that on a predictable cadence, right? Like chewy dog food, with our dog, right? Like, we get
Yep.
treats and his kibble like on subscription, right? Because you need it. But I think one of the challenges with Birchbox, specifically from like a marketing or growth perspective, is that you really didn't need a box of samples, beauty samples sent to your door every month. Was it nice to receive? Yes, for sure. It was a $10 price point, so it was very inexpensive. But like it just became like clutter and junk, even to those who can afford it.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, I don't need this anymore, right? Or I found a product that I like. I don't need to like sample a bunch of stuff anymore. Uh, and then there's like other categories like toilet paper or bulkier stuff where and I have good relationships with a handful of toilet paper D2C brands, but like that's a tough model because it's generally a low price point, right? Toilet paper is not a very expensive product, but it's also very bulky. So
Yeah.
shipping that, the cost of postage, the cost to ship that is really expensive. So it's hard to make the economics work. So it's kind of like this fine line of like razor blades are great, right? Because they're really, really small, they're really lightweight, they're a little bit pricier. That's a great model for subscription, and you need it every whatever few weeks or month or so. So it's kind of like a delicate balance of finding the right type of product that is amenable to a subscription model.
Yeah, and then two, what are some other kind of future trends? I know I mentioned the hot button items here, but is there something else that you're kind of seeing like out on the horizon, or is AI becoming a big player in this space too, or um, things like that? What are some changes you kind of see, in the next 1, 3, 5 years or whatever it may be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on the 3PL side, I was on another webinar yesterday or the day before, and you were sort of talking about this. Um, as a 3PL, I'm not sure how. I mean, besides the obvious, I'm not sure how impactful AI will be to a 3PL's business.
Yep.
I think it will be impactful to the people who work at a 3PL to be better at doing their jobs. I think there's a lot of software that 3PLs can embrace, that can help them be more efficient. There's a lot of logistics technology companies where AI is, a core facet of their business. So I totally embrace that. But I heard this quote from Eric Schmidt a little while ago. Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Google for about a decade, and then became their executive chairman for the next few years after. And he said, I think it was on a podcast, and he said that AI will not take your jobs, but someone who uses AI will. And I
Yep.
thought that was so clever, right? It's like a very fine difference, but it's important, right? And to my point right before that, I think it's the person at a 3PL who embraces AI, or it's the operator at a brand, right? Like, you're not like, the AI is not going to replace you, but Jacob, who's really effective at using AI, will replace Matt if I'm less effective than you. So it's here to stay, right? I know it's gone, a lot of buzz, but it's not a trend, right? It's the reality, right? It's like 25 or 30 years ago. I was around, but I was too young to really appreciate, the internet boom, of the 90s, right? I was a toddler, um, but I can imagine, and talking to people who were around back then, they were like, yeah, there was a ton of buzz about the internet, right? But like, those who had the foresight to appreciate what the internet was realized that, like, you better learn the internet. Can you imagine being a worker today and you don't know how to use the internet? Like,
Yeah.
even my boomer parents have email and use the internet, right?
Yeah.
Probably more than I do, right? So like it's going to be really helpful to you as a professional, to you as a business owner, to you as a leader, to take the time to like really understand what AI is doing. And it's not just using Chat GPT. That's a great place to start, or Perplexity, right? Like, great place to start. There's so many applications out there, and like, I still consider myself probably a 3 out of 10 on the scale of like understanding AI. And every day I try to get a little closer to the 4 and 5 and 10 eventually. So there's so much out there, and like don't hide from it, because you need to embrace it.
Yep. Well, awesome, Matt. This has been a great conversation. Before we close out, I wanted to give you an opportunity too. What's kind of the best way for people to reach you or get in touch? If it's a 3PL or ecom brand too, where should they maybe head specifically as well?
Sure. The best place, if you are a brand looking for a 3PL, if you're a 3PL looking to get more qualified leads, go to thirdperson.co, not .com. Too cheap to buy the .com, so we're stuck with .co. THIRD, third, and then person.co. You can start there. While that's all automated, I'm a human, so if you want to reach out to me directly as well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Uh, Maybe Matt or Matthew Hertz. My email is Matt, MATT, at thirdperson.co. So yeah, find me there, and happy to chat with anyone.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story and about what you're up to at third person, kind of some of these trends that you're seeing on the ecom and 3PL space. And look forward to hopefully seeing you again next year at Home Delivery World, if not before.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is a fun conversation.